Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom.
Good morning. This is Jos Visser, the author of Wednesday Wisdom, and this week's article is called The Burdens of Ownership. But before I get there, I would like to apologize for the quality of this week's audio and video recording, which is made from a rooftop terrace in Spain. One of the nice things about getting older is that it creates clarity. There are, for instance, many things that I used to get upset about, but these days I just don't give a shit about anymore. With a bit of luck, I have about 20 or so years to go on this planet, and I just can't be bothered anymore by certain things that I've seen happen all my life and that, despite the best efforts of many, are still happening on a daily basis. I first had that insight a few years ago when I was dating someone significantly younger. Not that much younger though, because if there's one thing that I really never ever want to do, it is explaining to a love interest who Pink Floyd is. My dear lady friend was complaining about some stuff that was happening at work, and I suddenly had this flash of insight. Yeah, I used to be upset about that too, but now I'm not anymore, because apparently I stopped caring. It was a huge relief. It's not that I've gotten completely cynical. I still get upset, but these days it is mostly with myself. All things considered, that seems to be a great target for upsetness because, guess what? Me is something I can change. I was, for instance, upset with myself the other day because I failed a practical flight test. Apparently, I'm not good enough yet, but that is something I can work on and improve. Another piece of clarity that dawned upon me in the last few years is that I'm terrible at owning real estate. This is quite hilarious because between the lovely Mrs. Wednesday Wisdom and myself, we own about 3 properties outright and we're always talking about buying more because, as it turns out, we're really good at buying real estate. But once we have it, we are really bad at doing all the work that is required to keep that real estate in mint condition. Owning is work. I learned this from my favorite aunt and uncle when they got a letter from the city some decades ago that informed them that per applicable law, they needed to do some work on their condo. The letter was really nice about it, but reminded the recipients that owning means maintaining. So they were on the hook for some work that would set them back a couple of grand. The owning means maintaining insight is precluding me from seriously considering buying a plane. I love flying and I would love to own my own plane, but if there's something that needs to be meticulously maintained, it's an airplane. The good thing about owning an airplane is that you're really not allowed to do any of the work yourself, or putting some air in the tires and some oil in the engine. The bad thing is that as the owner or operator, you're responsible for keeping your plane legal by meeting a very strict maintenance schedule and equally strict airworthiness directives issued by the FAA. Getting older made me realize that I'm a person of intense but short-lived attention for things that currently interest me. The moment the novelty wears off, my mind wanders off too and I start building an equally intense and short-lived passion for something else. My current interest is getting my ham radio license because that just seems fun and a great hobby for a nerd. It's a miracle really that I managed to raise a child, and I'm managing to stay married because both of these require long-term effort. But then again, the former is something you don't have to do all by yourself, and with respect to the latter, with Mrs. Wednesday Wisdom, you really never experience a dull moment. The owning is maintaining mantra also holds for software. Some years ago, I joined a startup, and during my ramp up, I wrote a piece of software that did something useful, but also potentially dangerous. I took lots of care to make sure that my code did the dangerous things correctly and safely, and after an extensive canary process, we released it into production, where it behaved wonderfully well. After some time, I transferred ownership of that piece of software to the appropriate team. In its new home, a junior engineer was assigned to take care of my software, and unfortunately, it was immediately clear to me that they didn't really understand how this thing worked, nor were they given the time and incentives to make that so. I was there for a bit to hold the junior's hand, but eventually I went on to do other things. I recently got news through the grapevine that, despite my best efforts, my code had recently gone rogue and that some of the scenarios it was designed not to let happen actually happened. I don't have any of the details, so I don't know what transpired, but what I assume happened is that the code functioned to everyone's satisfaction for years, and then people stopped looking at it closely. Every piece of software has sleeping bugs in it and is unwritten and often badly understood, expectations about the exact implementation of the services it depends on. As the environment changes, the still working code ambles toward the edge of the cliff, and then finally, Wile E. Coyote style, it tumbles into the abyss below. Many catastrophic software failures resemble the process of a company going bankrupt, slowly at first, then suddenly. When analyzing software failures of this nature, there's a lot of emphasis on the final step over the edge of the ravine, but I'm just as interested in the 10 steps before that fateful moment. Sure, that last step sealed the code's fate, but it was the 10 steps before that that brought it to the place where the final misstep could happen. Careful attention to what happens during the everyday running of your code can find these steps in the wrong direction as they occur. Unfortunately, not a lot of people look closely at the behavior of working code, so they miss the signs that the code has started the long walk towards the edge. This brings to mind the lemma by Sidney Dekker. Usually, everything that can go wrong doesn't, and then people learn the wrong thing. As a student pilot, I'm taught to think about my decision in terms of outs. If I make a decision to do or not do something, how many outs do I have left if that decision turns out badly? If you look at airplane crashes, a lot of focus in the popular press is on the proximate cause of the crash, which is usually the last out that went away. For instance, the pilot and plane were caught in bad weather and therefore they didn't make the landing and crashed because of wind shear or downdrafts or something like that. But if you look a bit deeper, you often see a series of steps, each of which took away an out and brought the whole situation to the point where there was only one out left. A recent episode of the I Learned About Flying from That podcast described a scenario where the passengers showed up later than expected, but the pilot still decided to leave. Because of high fuel prices at the Leeds airport, they decided not to take on fuel. Now it was getting dark, and because of the late departure, the incoming bad weather was more of a factor. And because of higher landing fees at airports that support instrument approaches, they had decided not to file an instrument flight plan. Each of these decisions took away an out, and eventually they barely made it back to the ground alive, depending on friends from the flying club to line up their cars and shine some light on the otherwise unlighted grass runway where they had to land. Software works like that too. If you're trying to write reliable software, you take a belts and suspenders approach that makes sure that no single thing breaks your code. But time will eat away at your provisions, taking away one out at a time. Eventually, your code has become dependent on a single thing working, and when that stops, you now have a failure. This is where careful ownership comes in. Owning is maintaining. So as an owner of a piece of software, you are responsible for making sure that you know that this is happening and then addressing it by creating new outs and putting in new belts and suspenders in all the right places. Unfortunately, this is not popular work. As a profession, we have serious shiny object syndrome, and most people would rather work on something new, hip, and happening than spend time on keeping the existing code base in a healthy state with ample outs. Our recognition and promotion processes are counterproductive in this respect too. Design the new system and put it in production will get you promoted, whereas kept our code base humming along and there were zero sevs does not. In my career, I've come across lots of teams that like having ownership, but that seem to be unwilling to do the work implied by ownership. The amount of times that I've been told that I cannot see or touch something because we own this can no longer be counted. Yes, I know that you own this, but it is broken or I need a feature and you're not doing the work. Much too often, ownership is about status, not about signing up to do the work. We are the food team, we own the bar system. Yeah, fine, great, who cares? Ownership should not be static. You should be valued for your actions, not for the number of acronyms on your wiki page. For the systems you own, do you ever look at the logs and metrics? If not, you're not the owner. You are, at best, the lazy guardian of a bunch of orphans, any one of which could become the next Voldemort.